Everyone, and welcome to the Poverty and Homelessness Board Executive Committee meeting on Thursday, September 18th, 2025. My name is Sean Murphy, and I am the chair. On the agenda today, we have public comment, approve the consent agenda, which includes the minutes from the July Executive Committee meeting and the August 2025 Statement of Revenue and Expenditures and Financial Dashboard. Brianna is going to be giving us an update on membership and committee reminders. Kate is going to have a funding discussion. Amanda with the COC update. Carly with the gender and sex reporting changes in HMIS. Then we'll have the jurisdictional updates. The October PHB member workshop, and then the wrap up. Right. And with that, we will do the executive team committee introductions. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Yeah, I'm Matthias Smith. I am the co-vice chair and the youth representative.
Yeah. Mayor Knudsen, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. This is Mayor Karen Knudsen from the city of Eugene. Nice to see you.
We're having technical issues and we can't hear you. So.
Oh no. Can you hear me now?
Can somebody say something? Oh, Carly can hear.
I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Carly, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I think everyone on the Zoom can hear, but maybe not.
Go to the microphone on the Zoom. It might be going to the wrong.
I think.
Would you like to introduce yourself while we're trying to figure out our volume here? So I think everybody else can hear you except for us in the room.
Sean, were you speaking to me? I'm so sorry, Chair. I could not.
This?
Chair, if you can hear me, this is Mayor Karen Knudsen from the city of Eugene. Did that work?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Hi, great to see you.
And Mayor Van Gordon, did you introduce yourself? Apologize.
No, I hadn't. Sean Van Gordon, Mayor of Springfield.
Okay, and we want to welcome everyone else who is here. Do we have anyone that would like to offer a public comment today? No, doesn't look like it. All right. And I apologize because normally I go around the room and introduce everybody, but I think everybody that's here is actually going to be talking today. But do you want to go ahead and we're informal here, by all means.
Melvin Niles, MSW intern from George Fox University.
I'm Bree. I am also an intern from Simmons University, Boston.
Brianna Rogers, I use she, her pronouns. I'm a senior program services coordinator with Lane County Housing and Community Action, overseeing anti-poverty and homelessness prevention programming.
Kate Budd, she, her, Human Services Division Manager with Lane County.
And Amanda Borda, I'm a senior program services coordinator with Lane County, overseeing continuum of care.
Go ahead, Carly.
Hi, Carly Walker. I'm the Homeless Management Information System Supervisor for Lane County.
Thank you. And would anybody else online like to introduce themselves? I didn't know if they were there or not. That's why I was concerned about calling on them. Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Genevieve. All right. And with that, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Matthias. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Knudsen. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, it passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. And I still don't see anything in for public comment. So we will move on to the membership update with Brianna.
Yes. Let me get to the right window. I was going to share just a quick update on membership, and if I could share my screen, then I will, but now my screens have gone wonky, and I don't know if I can find it. I don't think I can find it. Okay, so just a membership update that Councillor Mary Day had to step down from being a member on the Poverty and Homelessness Board. He realized there was another conflicting board meeting that happened at the same occurrence, and so is not able to take on this role. But it sounds like there is someone who.
Yeah, so we went back to the applications among those who would be eligible for the at-large elected official Poverty and Homelessness Board member. And the committee that helps with membership met with Councillor Alexa Benson from Veneta. And that group decided to move the candidate forward. So at the next meeting, which at this point will be in December, the opportunity to approve Councillor Benson will be provided to the PHB. So Sean, you were there at the meeting. Anything you want to share regarding Councillor Benson?
Yeah, that we had a lovely interview. She is really passionate about supporting and dealing with the unhoused issues, and specifically has a lot of information I think would be really helpful with the rural community, as she has been doing a lot of work herself in the rural community and the specific issues that they have and ways that they have approached it and worked together as a community. So I think her perspective will be helpful for us, particularly in the metro area, to brainstorm and use ideas and approaches that she has used in rural communities and how we can engage other rural communities and their barriers and how to be creative in making sure that they also get the supports and services that they need. So I'm excited to bring her on.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll provide that opportunity for the PHB to vote on Councillor Benson in December.
And then just a quick committee update. I was going to share a screen, but I'm not able to share a PDF for some reason. Just a quick reminder for anyone, or specifically board members, who are interested in joining any of the continuing ongoing committees or the new committees being stood up. The continuing ones being the Continuum of Care, Coordinated Entry, League for Lived Experience, Youth Executive for Youth Experience, and then Community Needs Assessment. Those are the kind of continuing ones happening. And then the new ones, which are 4 new committees being stood up to begin in January, which include the Cross-System Collaboration and Resources Group, the Provider Training and Program Policy, the Advocacy Group, and then the Food Needs Group, which maybe gets a name change, but food needs, food security. So just a reminder, if you are interested, to please join one of those committees.
Thank you. And Brianna, I was at an event yesterday, and community members that were on other committees were asking about joining new committees. I didn't know if we had all the list, or maybe if we could reach out to the individuals who were chairs of those previous committees to ask them if they could send out the new list of committees and subcommittees to those individuals who were on the previous committee, so that if they weren't part of the PHB, they could reach out if they would want to join a new one, because there were several folks who were on committees that are now
Yeah, if there are folks who are on previous committees that are no longer continuing, then they are more than welcome to join one of the new committees starting. I know James is doing outreach to board members to join committees, and then through that outreach, we would be doing, or with outreach, we would be doing outreach to community members who are interested. And so we would definitely include previous committee members in that.
Anybody like to add anything to the discussion with the committees? No? Okay. Kate, you're on with the funding update.
This one I'm sure I can do.
All right. Well, I know that all of you on this call are aware that there's much going on both at the federal and state level regarding policies as well as funding allocations, and there's still an enormous number of unknowns as to what the future holds. And so this update is very much a point in time, as well as just an opportunity to provide an update within the last 3 months as to what has changed. And so big picture, if you want to go to the next slide, from the macro level, compared to 3 months ago, we are, I should say, I am holding a bit of optimism on the federal level, having seen some significant variations from the presidential budget, which you may recall eliminated many of the funding sources that flows through the Human Services Division and Lane County. On the state level, we have recently seen the allocations, particularly around the homelessness programs, come in lower than we had hoped and anticipated. And so I'll share those with you as well. But ultimately, kind of a mixed bag of allocations at this point. Next slide. So on the federal level, the presidential budget came out a few months ago, and like I mentioned, many of the program sources were eliminated. We also saw that the Continuum of Care and the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program, as well as HOPWA, the Housing Opportunities for People with AIDS and HIV, were all merged into the Emergency Solutions Grant. And with that merger, it would have meant that programs that provide housing supports, in perpetuity on a permanent basis, such as Continuum of Care, permanent supported housing programs, would become time limited under the Emergency Solution Grant requirements. And so that was of concern. And in addition, the allocation under the presidential budget for Emergency Solutions Grant, while higher than what was allocated in this current federal fiscal year, it was only a minor increase when compared to the total budget for Emergency Solutions, Continuum of Care, and HOPWA when it's all being combined together. And so a lot of red flags going up with that proposal. And so positively, we know that the presidential budget is just one piece of information. And then the House and the Senate, they have appropriations committees that then, take the presidential budget under advisement, but then create their own budget. And so we saw significant variances. And in fact, both under the Senate appropriations budget and the House appropriations budget, we actually saw many of our funding sources not only be funded, but we saw a small increase in funding. So for example, if we look at the Continuum of Care YHDP funding, during federal fiscal year 25, it was funded at $3.5 billion. And both the House and the Senate appropriations committees, when looking to federal fiscal year 26, actually funded it a little bit more at $4 billion and $3.9 billion. So that's very positive. And as many of you know well, the next step is the proposed budget coming out of the appropriations committees need to be approved by the respective House and Senate. And then the two bodies come together and need to negotiate one federal budget. And so there are still many steps that need to happen. And things could definitely change. But when we see through the appropriations committees that in all the cases, almost all the cases, there's a small increase in funding in both the House and the Senate Appropriations Committee, it's reasonable to think that it would likely be funded and that this increased amount could be what is funded. We also have seen that there is talk coming out of the federal level that there likely will not be a federal fiscal year budget adopted prior to September 30th, which is when this current federal fiscal year ends. And so there could be a continuing resolution, which would keep the funding at the current levels for this federal fiscal year. Or there could be a government shutdown. And the government shutdown is a great concern at this point, because it does sound like it would, affect all of the federal government with a few carve-outs. And so while we don't know what the future holds, at this point, I am not hearing that we'll see an adopted federal budget for the next fiscal year before the end of this fiscal year. And so we'll have to learn what happens there. And I will also offer, you see a question mark under community service block grant. And that is because at this point, the Senate Appropriations Committee haven't allocated any funds. And so it is potential that they may not. And then there's, quite a bit of room for negotiation between the House and the Senate, or they may allocate and then that room decreases significantly. We also have emergency food and shelter program. And this is a unique program because it's funded through FEMA, and not all communities receive this dollars. It's really focused on communities with very low levels of poverty. And it is not, to my understanding, its own line item, like within the federal macro level budget. It instead is something that FEMA allocates as a part of their overall budget. And so it's going to be much more time before we know for sure if we'll receive ESP dollars. And right now we're not optimistic because we're seeing significant reductions across FEMA and conversations about whether FEMA will exist into the future are also happening at the federal level. So if you are an agency that was allocated EFSP funds, unfortunately, I would not advise that you budget for it at this point. Let me pause there and see if you have any questions. And please, if there's anything that you're tracking on the federal level that's applicable, feel free to share that as well.
Go ahead, Mayor Kinnison.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Kate, for that first part of your presentation. That table that you just were sharing, are there a few more, or will there be a few more columns or rows to that table in coming months that will help us understand the human impacts, the impacts to people and families and kids here in terms of those dollars? Because those are large numbers, and yet we also know numbers that don't meet the need, and in some cases, numbers that are getting much smaller. I'm just curious about the work to translate this kind of stark information to the local level and to people here?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your question. And I think that's a great idea. As you know, it takes a while for the dollars to flow through to the local level, which means it will take some time to truly understand the impact. But I have marked that down and we'll absolutely plan on doing that once we have a better understanding. Certainly applicable to the state funding reality that we'll be sharing momentarily, and we'll plan on also sharing that impact once it's fully known.
Thank you so much.
Other discussions?
And I will offer, Genevieve, thank you for sharing that. That is news that I was made aware of just a few hours ago, and I'm happy to expound a bit about that once I'm done with this presentation. And Sean, you may have some input as well.
Okay, I just wanted to ask the bottom, the bottom one with the emergency, food and emergency. Do we have an idea of what the impact would be for us on that? That one kind of seems like the strongest one where we're most likely at risk that it's not going to come to fruition in the next budget.
Yeah, and actually, Brandon, you might know that best.
Oh gosh, this is a great test. I think the proposed allocation that we thought we would receive not this fiscal year, but it would have been about March or April that we received the funding through December of this year. So just under a calendar year of that funding. I believe the proposed amount was about 140,000. So while smaller than other dollars that we receive, it still, provides food and shelter and housing assistance to folks in need. So I don't have the exact, household numbers that's served in the past, but just a dollar amount at least is about 140,000 that we would have received.
And then my last question, and you may not know, but thinking of the rural areas, which I think even when we have smaller cuts, it has a bigger impact on the rural providers. Will some of them be impacted if that's eliminated? Some of their funding come out of that
with the EFSP?
too?
Yeah, that's a good point. The priority of the allocation committee for EFSP is to provide the financial assistance to rural communities. And so there are a number of agencies who prioritize or are in rural areas that provide the rent assistance or food assistance. So they will take that hit. While it's metro and rural, they will take a hit with the EFSP.
Okay. So that'll just be something that we'll have to focus on. Because I know in the rural areas, even those small cuts end up having a big impact on their ability to sustain their service delivery.
I'm happy to look up what number of individuals or households were served last year to know kind of what that looks like in those different areas.
Which maybe, hopefully will give us an opportunity to maybe do outreach around some partnerships around how metro and rural can work together to actually, so the services don't go completely away.
Yeah, and I will offer at this point, the EFSP funds have not come in for months, and we are not aware of any complete ending of programs. So that at this point is not an impact, though to your point, we are seeing other funding reductions. So again, we're happy to share the impacts that are known and appreciate the idea. So I also just wanted to share a few of the federal realities that we're just working to understand at the county. One being that we have received some atypical grant requirements. One, for example, in our continuum of care grants is that HUD will not be doing any monitoring around programs following a housing first model. And so, what that says to HSD is that, HUD will be transitioning away from that type of model. We are still awaiting the continuum of care application. We expected it months ago. It is, I mean, theoretically, maybe it will never come out, but that application I've always shared, it's like a picture into HUD's brain. And so should it be released, it should help us understand further, what changes the federal government will be making around their approach to homelessness assistance. We saw a bit of that with recent executive orders, and a few of the approach changes that are on my mind is, one, that there's a real focus away from harm reduction and instead to an abstinence approach. We're also seeing a move away from low barrier approaches to more high barrier approaches, as well as from a housing first to a housing ready model. And so what that means to me is that with harm reduction, low barrier housing first, the approach is meeting an individual who is unhoused where they are and working as rapidly as possible to get them into housing without asking for them to go through a series of steps, such as needing to be clean and sober, such as needing to go through specific classes or having identification or making sure that they're going to treatment for 3 months before they get housing. And so with this change of approach, we're more likely to see that type of a stair-step model where someone has to do or achieve or meet specific requirements in order for someone to be provided housing. And it's a very different model from what the federal government has been supporting both financially and through the actions of HUD for at least the last 12 to 15 years. It also means that we're going to see likely a move away from permanent supported housing and also rapid rehousing, which is an evidence-based, both are evidence-based best practice models that started under the ARA kind of time period, which is back in like 2008-9. And so they're long-term, and instead it's going to be moving toward time-limited support. So this idea of permanency will be moved away from. And also, again, that idea of like where transitional housing really encourages people to kind of move toward a number of different goals in order to be able to stay and then to be able to kind of graduate on to housing. So the fact is that, in my opinion, this change of approach is very valid in that there are agencies that are doing it right now. And it's not that these approaches, are unneeded, because some people, they are well supported with these type of approaches. And we've also seen through clear research time and time again that there are also people, especially those who have been experiencing houselessness for a very long period of time, who really need the stability of housing in order to be able to move forward with other things like, reducing their substance abuse, with being able to, attend classes and, do work programs, et cetera. So where we're seeing this pendulum swing away from one approach, what it means is that the diversity of programming will likely become more limited, which is unfortunate in my mind, because we need very diverse programming because we are serving very diverse individuals. So I'll stop there and see if we have any questions about that. mechanism.
Thank you. Clearly, Kate, I'm very much appreciating these updates and the work that you're trying to do to help us stay oriented. I just want to clarify or ask a clarifying question to something that you just shared. And you mentioned that these shifts, that the new approaches won't be unsuccessful in meeting needs because there are so many people who also have those needs, and services designed to those areas would be that there would be many people who would be accessing those needs, and probably speaks to the underfunding of support over decades of time. Can you say anything more about what that means for the people who would not be categorically falling into those areas of service? Any kind of more insight to that? Because it sounded to me like what you were really saying was these funding approaches will still be important and needed because we have huge areas of need in these areas. And also we have these other needs. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. And I think one key population that will not be served as well are those who are chronically homeless and so have a disability, have been experiencing houselessness for more than 3 years or 1 year, depending on the length. And so with that, those folks are, if you think about the level of symptoms that they're experiencing, based on their physical health or their behavioral health, and the level of just behavior change that they've experienced because they've needed to live on the street for a long period of time, their ability to, for example, go to like an inpatient treatment facility on a daily basis in order for them to be able to access housing is very challenging because they are simply just surviving on the street. And so one of the greatest benefits of permanent supported housing, for example, is it was able to successfully, house and then intensively support those who are chronically homeless in housing. And they found that the abstinence-based model, the stair-step models were far less effective with those with the longest period of houselessness, simply because they're in survival mode and they need to be able to have that roof over their head for them to be able to move beyond that survival mode. And so that is a population I think is going to be heavily affected. And we also know that folks who are chronically homeless also have the most demands on our systems of care. And so if we're not able to get them into housing and help them stabilize and rely less on our systems of care, then the costs to those systems of care will continue to increase in their engagement. And I will say, while the federal government may be moving away from supporting permanent supported housing, there's no indication that the state is or will. And so we're fortunate in that many of our programs, they actually receive more funding from the state to support the permanent supported housing beds than from the federal government. And so while things may need to change, and at this point, there's nothing concrete that says that, but if things need to change, then we also will need to look at, how do we move funding where and if possible in order to sustain the maximum number of PSH beds with the intensive supports.
Thank you.
Any others for discussion?
All right, so we'll then go to the state where we have received a bit more finite information. And that includes for the statewide shelter system, we're seeing a very significant reduction in funding. Last fiscal year, we received about $15 million. That includes specific fiscal year 25 allocations, but also rollover funds from the previous year. All of those funds were connected to the governor's executive order or our all-in efforts. And so what this means is we are very much focusing on maintaining the beds that received all-in funding last year, and those beds that also received the funding and were awarded funded through the request for proposal that Lane County held at the end of last fiscal year. And we've approached those shelters and asked them to reduce their funding, particularly around costs beyond shelter operations. And so case management, for example, that helps someone move beyond shelter. Unfortunately, the state has asked us to reduce funding around that and prioritize the operations funding. And so enormous appreciation to our shelter providers who have done that. We asked for that information yesterday or maybe today. So I know they've done that. Great appreciation, and are making cuts as we speak. And once we know the impact, we'll certainly share what that looks like. We also have received the allocation for ORI funds, which supports diversion efforts in the community. And so folks who are in shelter may be involved with treatment supports and need clean and sober housing, or even folks who are living on the streets but have been able to find permanent housing. They can access diversion assistance and get move-in cost supports, as well as have creative housing problem solving conversations with both staff at nonprofits as well as our Lane County diversion staff. And so at this point, those dollars are staying stagnant. We haven't yet heard the official allocation for LTRA, and so that remains to be seen. But then with ORDAP eviction prevention, which is rent assistance, we also saw a significant reduction there, about $3 million. And so agencies are also, they've seen a significant reduction just in the amount of money that they receive. There are some agencies who received an allocation last fiscal year that are not receiving an allocation this current fiscal year. And so again, just enormous appreciation to the agencies that we work with. This is difficult, especially in the middle of a budget year, but they've been, incredibly gracious and just really focused on doing everything they can to support those in needs in the community. I'll go ahead to the next one, just to share a few of the state realities that we are seeing. We are receiving these allocations very late in the fiscal year, and that is challenging because ideally we would have gotten this information last fiscal year to be able to plan for this fiscal year. And one of the primary reasons this is the case is just the decision around the total homelessness funds was made toward the end of the last legislative session in June. And so it has taken quite a bit of time for the state to turn around and then make specific allocations for each community. We also are seeing that at the state, there's a significant number of new staff members. And so that just means that the history of, what happened last year or even 3 years ago isn't there. And so that also is, it's presenting opportunities to share historical experiences and to help bring state staff up to speed as to, what is typical and customary. And then the state itself is facing a growing deficit. We know that the tax structure is tied to the federal tax structure. And so where the federal changes have occurred, to reduce tax impacts. We're also going to see that at the state level unless changes are made. And so it just means the state will be bringing in fewer dollars. And then we also know we have a tax system based on property taxes, which is challenging when we're seeing folks move out of the state. And then the state itself is seeing significant federal disinvestments, as well as just seeing the potential future disinvestments that will come, Medicaid being an extraordinarily large challenge that the state will face. So it just continues to compound. And then also to recognize that the last 4 years, we were very fortunate to receive ARPA funds due to COVID. And so there has been very flexible resources within Lane County, within our partner jurisdictions at the state level, to be able to help fill in gaps and expand the programming that's available. And those ARPA funds, at least for Lane County, are gone. And I think if any still existed, the federal level took them back. And so that flexibility, that ability to make additional investments at the federal level just isn't there anymore. Stop there. Any questions? Go ahead. I'll just say if anything comes up and questions arise, or you'd like to have a longer conversation, feel free to reach out. Thank you. Oh, so Genevieve, thank you for sharing that Pacific Source just shared with the state that they are not going to continue a contract as a CCO in 2026. And that is specific to Lane County. At this point, I'm not aware that they are, completely leaving the state of Oregon. And so what that means is those who are on Medicaid or OHP who have Pacific Source as their OHP CCO provider, they will need to transition over, presumably to Trillium, unless another CCO is brought in. And as you can imagine, that's going to cause challenges for the members. But then it also causes challenges because right now, most agencies that serve OHP clients have contracts with Pacific Source as well as Trillium. And so if Pacific Source leaves, then it just leaves the Trillium contract, which likely presents challenges. So we are still learning more as to what the true impact is going to be of this change, but it is significant. And there will be impacts. And I think that there is a small amount of room potentially for the state to come back and maybe offer a greater reimbursement level for Pacific Source. And Pacific Source is publicly sharing this information. And so it would lead me to think that they are very committed to this change and moving forward. Genevieve?
Yeah, I guess just kind of in concern on, resource provider funding. There was also a large influx of health-related social needs funding to service providers over the last couple of years, and hopefully maybe still this year. So that is just a whole other level of lack of funding that folks are going to have to navigate now. So,
yes, thank you. Absolutely. And it will remain to be seen what and if Trillium can pick up some of those pieces. The dollars for the HRSN benefits are coming from the state, from OHA to the agencies. And so potentially they would be able to kind of move, it would go through the CCOs to the agencies, but they would be able to move the dollars. And that at the very least will just take a great deal of time, and there will remain uncertainties until that path is clear. So thank you for making that point.
When does the contract period end?
It would end December 31.
Okay, so it's
And Sean, certainly if you have anything to add, if you've heard about this. No, I knew that it was a possibility, but you just confirmed. So, and I think we'll try to keep people posted as we learn what is happening. And I do know that just all across the state, there have been struggles, just like we're struggling, here with funding around housing and services, is that the cost and the need have risen, and the funding to address those needs and those services have dwindled for a variety of reasons, a lot of which you have mentioned. So we're in this crossroads of what to do and how to make sure that we can support the community during this. I'm going to say it's like a trifecta of, sometimes we have federal, sometimes we have state, sometimes we have, but they're just all coinciding together at the same time, one on top of the other. So I'm going to say, and I've been doing this for decades, and I remember transitional housing and all of those things which in my mind was like, I think that should be how they tell you when you can retire. When you started doing something has now come back around again, that you should be able to retire. But I know that doesn't work. But we will get through this and we will figure it out. But I am feeling hopeful that there is a lot more focus on the partnerships, and even with the business community and the governmental entities and nonprofits, that there is that realization that we all have to work together to come up with solutions, and that at least here in Lane County we have gotten that ball rolling now instead of 6 months or a year down the road when everything has fallen apart and then started considering that. So go ahead, Genevieve.
I really just wanted to thank you for that sentiment, but also add the scary fact that, as far as OHP recipients in the county, the majority are on Pacific Source. So it is, hopefully, if anyone knows anyone at Kaiser, sees if they want to have a CCO down here, I think that would be a really great time to ask. Just because I worry about Trillium being able to absorb that massive influx. So thank you for addressing it.
Yes. And because you're right, I think it's Pacific Source has almost 70. So to think that we have 3 months, well, I think to bring any new CCO in to pick that up within 90 days, it's going to be a huge lift to do that, or for even the system to come up with a plan, if it's going to be Trillium, to try to come up with something in 90 days. That's going to be a Herculean effort. So we will definitely need to support those that we serve and each other to figure out how to navigate this. And I was going to say it might be a bad time, but I don't know. But put back on the agenda later on in the year about HRSN funds for folks who are eligible for Medicaid, who could potentially get some short-term rental assistance that may be able to offset some of the funding losses from the, wait a minute, I'm going to say the wrong grant, because I was going to say diversion, but eviction prevention funding, and that we may be able to offset to be able to use those funds and then help others in the community who maybe are not eligible for OHP to be able to utilize the funds that are available.
And I just want to stress that this information just came out today. And so, yeah, as you can imagine, I think everyone is scrambling around like, okay, what are the challenges? How do we work? And I'm sure OHA is very much doing that. So we all have much to learn. And also, do want to understand the impact. So we'll continue to share information as we learn. I know, even at Lane County, we're still like, just in the hourly phase of like, all right, what is this going to mean for the county services?
Thank you, Kate. And as I ask everybody to take a deep breath, as we move over to Amanda, we're going to take a deep breath before you start your presentation.
Yes, I apologize, my updates are not anymore.
That's okay. It is what it is.
We'll do our best.
Oh no, that's why I'm doing deep breathing. So that's like to take a breath and then we're going to move on to the next. Not that you're going to have a bright, rosy picture for us, but.
Sure, yeah. I know we have another presentation, so I'll try to go quickly. You can go to the next slide. So we have not received any updates since the email we received in early July about HUD indicating they would be releasing a new fiscal year 25 COC notice of funding opportunity, or NOFO. So we have not heard much since then. We did hear at some point some rumblings that it was in a final version, but that was over a month ago. So that gives me a little concern that it's now being edited further, or they're making some other changes. And so I think the concern there is that sort of the longer this is delayed, the longer awards might be delayed. And as you know, we have some grants that are the earliest start we have is January, and so just a few months from now. So we have some that would have a longer delay in awards if we still have not completed the NOFO. Typically we receive those awards by around January. So if we still haven't gotten something by now, it's probably going to be a few months after that. We have also still not received our final grant inventory worksheet, which other COCs have received. I have reached out to HUD and they said they have approved the changes, but for some reason we have not received that back. And we have also not received a response to our appeal that we submitted. If you remember, there was a HUD error, which resulted in one of our grants not being awarded, which was completely a HUD error. And so we are hoping that will be awarded, but we have also not received an answer to that appeal, which was submitted in June. And I'm also told that is still processing somewhere at HUD. The good news, if there is any, is that we have executed all of our current grant agreements. So we do have our current programs funded, and that money is moving, and those programs are still operating in their current grant period. So that is good. Next slide. What we do know now is that on September 5th, HUD had released a third iteration of the COC builds notice of funding. Just after they had notified Congress about a month earlier that they had actually made those awards. So they had chosen the 14 projects they were going to award under the second iteration. And then basically they did nothing with that, and then released a brand new notice, which was completely different. And so this third notice had a 1-week deadline, was based on yes or no responses only to a set of merit criteria on a first come, first served basis. So essentially whoever got that in quickest by answering those yes questions would be awarded, essentially is what it looked like. And so that was due on September 12th. That funding, the COC builds funding, which was for new development, acquisition or rehab of permanent supportive housing, will expire at the end of this month if it is not awarded, because I think the initial allocation was from fiscal year 23, if I'm not mistaken. And so they have to get that funding out by the end of this month. Lane County, as you know, did not apply for that opportunity. We did not have an applicant in that first notice when it came out. There wasn't sort of a project that was aligned timeline-wise to be ready for that funding. And I'm sort of glad we didn't, because now we would be on this roller coaster of NOFOs and awards for that opportunity. And what we also know is that the National Alliance to End Homelessness has now filed a lawsuit against HUD based on the funding restrictions in that notice, essentially saying that it's not competitive, it's too restrictive, and it isn't just not the way competitive federal funds should be awarded. And so what we do know is that a judge has issued a temporary restraining order on that. And I think that there is a hearing tomorrow is what I heard. And so we'll see where that goes. The reason I am giving an update on the COC builds opportunity is that that could give us some signal of what we might expect HUD to try to do in a COC regular NOFO. So these are the items that were in the merit criteria list. And so just to be clear, these are not what is in a COC NOFO. We haven't seen it yet. But there's a lot of speculation from the National Alliance, from other COCs, that this might be like sort of what we could expect some version of these, whether it's in a narrative form, whether it's in requirements, or whether they try to do something like the COC builds, where it's just yes or no. We will see. They significantly narrowed the population to serving elderly and physically disabled individuals. So to me, that reads that they're kind of narrowing the disability, which usually includes substance use disorder and mental health disabilities. And this seems to indicate they're prioritizing physical disabilities and serving those who are elderly. There's also a couple items about providing on-site services specifically, as well as requiring participants through contract or lease to participate in services, and indicating whether you currently require participation services. So again, sort of like Kate indicated, there's this move away from that housing first model, which is really rooted in client choice and not requiring specific service engagement. This would be moving back to requiring those steps to be taken in order to keep your housing. It also has an indication about customized supportive service plans, which indicated that folks would participate in full-time services. So there was an exception for those who have full-time employment, are disabled or elderly and not able to work. And so this seems to indicate if you don't have full-time work or not able to work, that you should be full-time engaging in services, is sort of my read on that. There's also the same language we saw elsewhere. This is abbreviated, it's long, but just essentially moving away from any harm reduction approaches would not be eligible. And they want to see that fewer than 10% of your participants are returning to homelessness as well. Next slide. There were also a few others which are concerning. One is you had to indicate that yes, your city, county, or state prohibits public drug use and enforces that prohibition, as well as prohibits public camping and enforces that prohibition, and utilizes standards that address individuals who are a danger to themselves or others. So that is sort of in line with some of the executive orders that we've seen in that language. And then substantially implements and complies with SORNA, which is a sex offender registration sort of national assessment of the standards that you have in your state, and or the state of Oregon does not fully implement all of those items in SORNA. And then there are a couple about affirming fairness and reality, one of which is that the applicant does not and will not deny the sex binary in humans or promote the notion that sex is a chosen or mutable characteristic, which, for Lane County would be problematic. We certainly do gender affirming care, as well as in the state of Oregon, gender identity and expression is a protected class. And so this would be something we wouldn't necessarily be able to align with, as well as there was both merit criteria and a specific called out requirement to cooperate with federal immigration enforcement in this COC builds NOFO. Next slide. So again, there are not many COCs who would be able to say yes to all of those criteria, or even most of them. So that's concerning. And I think that's the crux of sort of the National Alliance saying this is too restrictive. There would be only a handful of states even able to be eligible if those are the criteria. And again, we don't know yet if these merit criteria will show up in a COC NOFO or in what form they might. It may be that we have to answer narratives to these effect. The COC builds NOFO did not have any narrative. It was simply yes or no to those questions. And it's important, I think, for us to sort of recognize and reaffirm our values, both as a county and a continuum of what we're like we talked about in other meetings. We want to stand by our values and what we want to see in our community. And so that will be the challenge, I think, as we see some of these other things coming down and this other language, is making sure we can understand what we're willing to say yes to and what we want to stand firm in our values. And Lane County has so far done a good job of that, I think, in the other things that have come down. And it may be important to strategize, around funding of, like Kate mentioned, the state is not necessarily in alignment with some of these newer things that we're seeing or this language that we're seeing. And so it might be important for us in the future to think about where we strategically use federal funding versus state funding versus local might become a bigger conversation for us. And I think just for us and me, we're just preparing in any way for these potential really short timelines and delayed funding of awards if the NOFO does not come out, very soon. That could lead to some delay in funding next year. And so just preparing in any way that we can to front load other funds, do whatever we can to make sure that we're covered there. I don't have a positive note to end on. I wish I did. And again, I'm just sharing this to be transparent about sort of what we're seeing because folks are thinking this could give us some idea of things we might see in some way. Any questions or discussion?
Could you go back to the, what was it, slide 5 real quick? I just wanted to check something. Okay.
And so Amanda, this is basically, we could be looking at the combination of what Kate has said with what our projects need to look like and having to comply with all of these
We don't know yet.
other statements. I shouldn't say the worst case scenario, but that could be what we would be looking at of having to make a decision.
Yeah, I think when obviously we saw that there was going to be a new fiscal year 25 NOFO, that's concerning in itself because we know there's going to be changes. But I think once we saw and other COCs saw this opportunity come out and the language that was used and how hard of a line they're sort of taking with some of those things, it sort of became much more concerning, I think, of they're really digging in on some of the things that they want to see. And we'll see how, again, the lawsuit turns out and how this plays out in the next few weeks. And that might give us some maybe hope or a more positive indication.
And then I just have one more question for the two of you. This would go into effect what year? I mean, they're talking about it now. So if everything goes, is it 2027 or 2028?
For the COC fiscal year 25, those are projects that start in fiscal year 26 and end in 27, or calendar year 26 and end in 27.
Okay. So the earliest grant that we would have to sign would start January 1 of 2026.
Okay.
One.
January 2026 is going to be a banger. Well, okay. Any other? Breathe. Any other questions or discussions? All right, then we're going to move on to Carly with the gender and sex reporting changes in HMIS.
There are some themes today. And I think I may be the most positive person today. So just wanted to throw that out there. Let me share my slides. Not that everything is all positive, but wanted to talk about what's going on with some HUD information that we do know or perhaps will know. But there's some themes here around there's a lot we don't know or haven't heard formally. Like every time I talk to Amanda or Kate, we're sort of like reading tea leaves to try to figure out something. Typically for HMIS, which is our Homeless Management Information System, which is a federally designated, all the regulations come from HUD, so from the federal government. Typically once a year, there's an opportunity to change the questions that are being asked. HUD has the opportunity to change those questions and to tell all continuums of care what questions they should be collecting. So that usually starts October 1st. Some years they choose to skip it. This year we thought we were going to skip it, and then we found out we were not, or that the changes would be really minor. Typically on October 1st, we would see some changes to what questions are required. Through our vendor, we have heard proposed changes, but we actually haven't heard anything formal from HUD yet. And I learned yesterday that we won't make any changes until HUD releases final approval. And what I heard Amanda talk about is there's all sorts of things that we think are easy, should go right through, but we still just haven't seen happen. And I predict this will sort of go in that category. So who knows when these changes will actually be made, but just want to let folks know things are coming. Announcements are going out to agencies either today, we have a meeting this afternoon, and we'll send out emails as changes actually occur. But wanted to throw that out there. Also, we use HMIS for everything community action and state funded as well. So we saw about 34,000 clients last fiscal year and have still been awaiting OHCS's requirements for the fiscal year that we're almost 3 months into and haven't received them formally. So this is the best information I have right now. I don't anticipate it to change much. I just want to let people know what's coming. I'm not happy about what was in the COC builds application, but I'm glad Amanda showed sort of some of the language that's come out from the federal government around gender and sex identity, because it's been a big issue and is something we've been talking a lot about, given the changes that HUD has announced. So what they would like to happen starting October 1st is to add a new question called sex, where there would be 5 options for that question for folks to answer. Either female, male, doesn't know, don't want to answer, or we didn't collect it at all. So there's only 2 options really for folks to choose from. HUD has announced that they will be required for some specific federal funding sources, but not all of them. So Continuum of Care, Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program, Emergency Solutions Grant, Veteran Administration Supportive Housing, PATH, which is persons transition through homelessness, I believe. RISE, a youth program, SSVF is a veterans program, and so is GPD. Last year, we served about 10% of our clients through one of these programs. So it is significant, and we will have to ask it for these programs, but we are not required to collect it for everyone. HUD has also retired the question about gender, where you'll see a more inclusive list and folks can pick more than one answer. OHCS has told us that they will require this gender question. Even though HUD's getting rid of it, we still have the option to keep it as a local question, or to keep up with local funding requirements. And OHCS has said, yes, we would like to continue using the gender question. Last year, we served over 80% of our clients through one of these programs. Certainly the more inclusive option. At some point when we found out this was maybe coming down the pipeline, we sort of had to choose. Do we want to ask both questions? Do we want to ask just one? What should we do? Given the funding requirements and wanting to be as inclusive as possible, where we've landed, because we have some local flexibility, is to keep gender as a locally required question for everyone, and then to only have sex be asked for programs that are required by their funder to collect it. The intent here really is to be as inclusive as we can and as welcoming and gender affirming as we can while trying to keep the funding running. So just want to acknowledge for the 10% approximately of clients who are in a federally funded program that falls into one of those categories, they will have to be asked both gender and sex. I think it's really important to keep that gender question for everyone because there's local disparities we may want to look into and have information about, and there's questions we want to ask locally with our data that we can't ask if we don't include that and continue it as a local question. So for most programs, 90% really of folks, things will just continue as normal. We'll continue to ask the same questions as we typically do. There are a portion of folks who will have to be asked that sex question now in addition to the gender question. It is a lot of bureaucracy for something that seems to be working fine in my opinion, but we are where we are. We did want to point out also that OHCS funds ESG. So they pass through ESG from the federal government to us. For clients in those programs, OHCS has to they have to pass down that sex requirement. But we have talked about what information we want to share with OHCS because of concerns about what information is being shared with who, and outing folks who don't want to be outed, or concerns about where information goes. And so that's really what I wanted to talk more about. And I know I have limited time, but I'm happy to send these along and continue to answer questions too. But there have been a lot of totally fair concerns about what information we collect in HMIS and where it goes. So I was hoping to just sort of clarify some of those points today. The information that we send to the federal government, to HUD, is only aggregate information. Locally, we control our HMIS. Lane County has its own vendor, its own database that is not linked or shared with other ones. So HUD has no access to our system. At this point, neither does OHCS. No one can log in and pull information from the federal government. Everything that HUD has about our clients has been sent to them, and it is always aggregate information. With the exception of occasionally we'll do monitorings and send a few client files in a secure manner. But in terms of who is being served and what disabilities they have, what their race or ethnicity is, what their sex or gender identity is, that information they do not have. So I just included some examples of what that looks like. So on the PIT count, they know how many people are Indigenous and were in shelter. They just have a number. They don't know who those folks are or what their gender was or that other information. Same thing for disabilities. There's been some information coming out about people with mental health conditions. We don't share the information about individuals in that way. They really cannot pull that apart and identify people. It's a totally fair concern to have, and there have been some stories in the news recently about the federal government requesting information, whether that's from Medicaid recipients or from public housing authorities. But in all of those circumstances I'm aware of, they collected information they actually already had access to because they were national databases like the Medicaid system. We do send more information to OHCS and just wanted to be really clear about that. OHCS gets a monthly report from Lane County that has row by row information about people who were served in OHCS funded programs. All clients in one of these programs are asked to sign a release of information and informed that information goes to OHCS. And I've included a screenshot of sort of what that looks like. You'd have someone's ID number, their gender, their race, their date of birth, whether they have disabilities and information like that. It's not possible to identify individuals just with that, but if it were linked with another data set, that certainly is possible. I'm not aware of any linking that they do at this point, but just wanted to point out that it's possible. And that I'm not aware that that OHCS has been asked by the federal government to share any information. In that OHA case, they've been really clear and public about that. So I would expect the same type of approach if that were to happen again. There are some federal programs that require that row level information. That is never sent by the county to the federal government. It is always sent by the agency who administers that program. For example, the VA may send some information directly to the federal or to the VA. So SSVF may send row level information to the VA. Runaway and homeless youth, Looking Glass may send row by row information to to RAI. But that's not something that we would do on behalf of that agency. The agency always provides that themselves. So we do hold a lot of information on a lot of folks and take that really seriously, the security and privacy, and wanted to make it clear that there are multiple levels at which that information is protected. So some of those are federal. The 2004 data and technical standards are quite old at this point, but they still hold. We have sanctuary promise laws for folks who may not be citizens. We also do not collect citizenship status, so that's not something we'd be able to share. There are consumer protection laws. We also have local privacy policies. And just wanted to, I guess, my takeaway I would hope that folks have is that seeking shelter or seeking services should not heighten anyone's risk in any way if there are things that they're concerned about. And just want to encourage agencies also to think about data privacy and how we're keeping folks protected. It's not a great time. I know folks are feeling nervous and totally understand that, and just want to make sure we're doing everything we can to keep control over things where we can, if that makes sense. Those are all my slides. I don't think that was positive, but just there are a lot of things I think it's fair to be scared about and aren't necessarily issues in this particular realm.
Any questions for Carly? Thank
Okay,
you.
well, happy anytime, feel free to reach out. I know I've heard from a few agencies with questions, and as they come up, just let me know and we're happy to help you answer those.
Thank you for that. And I know it had come up too about being trauma informed. And one of the things that we had been talking about is that in no way does that mean that we disrespect how people identify themselves. And so that for many will not change. You are who you are and who you identify. And part of trauma-informed care is that would be respected, so that it should not change how we practice with engaging with the people that we serve. So.
I actually do have just a quick question, Carly. With the sex question on HMIS, would it be just possible to not require it for those for grants that don't need to ask it, like it doesn't even appear as a question?
Sure. That is a great question. You've seen the inside of HMIS. You have like a visual to imagine here. Because of the way that the government has interpreted this sex question and told our vendors to implement it, it has to be visible to everyone. It won't be required, like you can continue to move on without answering that question. We're going to send some information to folks explaining where it is, why it's in the place that it is, and that it's not required. It'll only be on the profile. It won't be in any of the assessments. So in the same spot as veteran status, if you're familiar with that. So we'll let people know when we know it actually will be added, and are hoping it doesn't take up too much space for people, and we'll leave it off the intake forms, for example.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? All right, thank you. And we are now to jurisdictional updates. Somehow we're back on track with time. I don't know how we did it, but great. Do we have any jurisdictional? Oh, Commissioner Farr is not here today. Any updates for Eugene?
Hi, Chair. Thank you. Yes, I do have a short update. This morning, I joined a grand opening at a new community land trust project, a mixed income project that was built by Dev Northwest. The last time I was out at that site was at the groundbreaking for that project. And I mention it first because it's a really great example of partnership over many years among our state partners, our state lawmakers, city government, local organizations, and local builders, and neighbors and people here. And a really great project made possible by those connections, relationships, and partnership over many years. I also want to highlight that I appreciate that our city and county are collectively advocating for the full funding that is expected for our shelter system and needed to fulfill this priority work in our community. Obviously, some big shifts and updates this week, and an important time for us to continue being great partners and working together. The city and the city-supported shelters that are receiving state funding are investigating the potential local impacts to any new funding reality on both specific shelter programs and our overall shelter system. And it's really important to reiterate the unique needs of our region with regards to homelessness and the importance of our shelter system. In Eugene, as the population center of Lane County, we experience this crisis acutely and in close proximity. And so any progress made in Lane County is a signal that the city of Eugene is also making progress, and the inverse of that can also be true. So I just want to recognize and appreciate the work that we have ahead, the challenges we have ahead. I want to thank staff again for the really helpful updates across many different issues affecting all of us today, and just remain deeply committed to this work that we have to do together, and the importance of communicating the work that we are doing and the success of the work and the effectiveness of the work that we are doing together out to the broader community. Still, many people do not know how we do this work. Some people think that we do more than we do, and a lot of people don't know how effective that we have been when partnership and resources are focused on the challenges that we face. A couple of other very brief updates is that I also was able to join the very large group of folks who are celebrating at Everyone Village this week as well, and the opening of the recuperation cottages and the new health clinic that are now a part of that neighborhood project and site. The city put substantial investment into that property in 2021, 2022, when it first opened as a shelter, as Everyone Village was emerging, even as a name. And so it's really exciting to see this work continue and to see how access to healthcare as a critical community need is being supported in really creative ways. On affordable housing within our community, we have over 100 units that have recently celebrated grand openings. And in our pipeline locally, about 800 affordable housing units with 140 under construction and about 400 units starting construction in this fiscal year. Looking forward to meeting these challenges that we have ahead and continuing to work together. And just want to take this second to appreciate you all for your work and these important updates today, and to everyone who's also paying attention to this conversation.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Van Gordon?
All right, thank you. Last week, Springfield did celebrate the ribbon cutting for the Alma Apartments, which is the cornerstone work that had been going on 17th and about Q for a little while. It was probably 4 or 5 years in the making. Cornerstone did a fantastic job with it. It's great to see more affordable housing come online in the community. And more importantly, I think it did what Springfield does best, which is just a lot of partnerships, a lot of creative thinking around land. And really that story started with a college student in that area, right? So it really sets that up for it to be a successful development when the local area is saying, "Hey, we want this in our community." The question that Lane County staff handed over to us is really how we were tracking the financial forecasts and what impacts they have for the city of Springfield. Right now, we are still tracking it through our intergovernmental and government affairs folks, and continuing to share information with Lane County and the city of Eugene, but we don't see an impact up to this point for us. We're still planning on continuing the same allotments that we normally do, which is about 15% of our CDBG dollars, about $30,000 for our overnight parking, and just generally about $160,000 for health and human services support. The other thing that will come up in the next couple of months. We've successfully acquired additional land, and we'll be working through that process to try to find a developer for it for additional affordable housing. So that's what I have.
Thank you. Do we have any representatives from other areas? I don't think so.
Mike is out.
Okay.
Hello,
Hello.
I'm Dana Merriday. I'm a city councilor in Cottage Grove.
Welcome. Go right ahead.
We have our policy with unhoused is, in the words of our city manager, a work in progress. And my personal feeling, and not representing the views of the council or the city management, is that it is not, we need a lot more work and more progress. So there's it's a dawn to dusk shelter. Another counselor and I have been going once a week to check in, help wake up the residents and get them going on their day. It's turned out exactly as the former city manager predicted. He was not in favor of establishing a dusk to dawn style camp because residents are complaining, well, they're just loitering around the gates once it's closed or going over to the park once it's closed. And now we can't use the park. Well, that was foretold. I mean, the manager had spoken to many other communities that have tried this program and found it to yield that exact results, that the residents would move their things just far enough so that they were on public property and not subject to being harassed further, and then at the end of when the camp reopened, move back in. And so where they got what they wanted, the residents were very adamant about not having an established camp, so they got their dusk to dawn wish, and they got the effects that went along. So we still need a lot of work in Cottage Grove. We did make it a part of one of our council goals to revisit. It's just that there hasn't been a lot of bandwidth or appetite for it, but it definitely needs, we need a coherent program. I think unofficially it's trying to see if we can get as many people to leave as possible, but that's, again, just my personal observation and not any reflection on the council. In the positive note, the city did purchase a 60-acre parcel that was not developable, or no one had expressed interest in developing. And by the city, we got a $3 million grant through the state to put infrastructure in there and also developed easements. So we will have a parcel that will be out of that will go to truly affordable homes, and we will be working with a nonprofit to establish those, and the rest of the developable residential acreage will go to single family and small affordable housing as well. So that's a very big need in Cottage Grove, housing on all levels. So we're excited about that.
Thank you, Councilor Mary Day. Okay, then I think with that, we are down to, remember, October, we do not have a PHB meeting, but we will have the Trauma Healing Project trainings, October 3rd from noon to 2, and October 27th from noon to 2. And if you haven't already, PHB members, make sure that you register for those events. And then as a wrap up, I'm going to do a different one, is that I think first, remember that a lot of the information that we got today is preparation information, and it is not yet reality. So, part of the due diligence is to let people know what potentially could be coming down the pike so that we can prepare for that. But the majority of the things that we talked about today are not yet written in stone. We just have to remember, like I said before, to breathe. And we always have to have backup plans, and then a lot of times a backup plan behind that backup plan, which is part of the reason for sharing this information today, but also know that a lot of it is not yet written in stone. And I think the other positive thing, which is what I'm going to focus on, is all the representatives today, when we did the jurisdictional update, talked about the development of affordable housing and the preparation or opening or about to open of units in many of the areas in Lane County for affordable housing, which is something that we know is desperately needed in our community, and really helps us in working towards the housing stability and addressing the needs for the unhoused community. At an event I went to, we kind of talked about that it is a continuum and that we have a lot of folks who are working 2 and 3 jobs and are still unhoused because they can't afford the fair market rent. So the fact that all this affordable housing is coming online is wonderful to hear. And so with that, I am going to adjourn the meeting. Thanks everyone for coming, and we'll see a lot of you in October.
Thank you.